Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dawn Tura, and I'm President and CEO of Sourcing Industry Group, and I am so excited to be your moderator today. So just a few housekeeping items we're going to go through before we jump into the content for today. So SIG likes to stay connected with you, and we'd like to stay connected with you in every single forum that we can. So please connect with us on our Twitter page, on our LinkedIn page, follow our blog, follow our YouTube, follow us on Facebook, and then me personally as well. I would love to connect with all of you. But a lot of our peer-to-peer conversations and really problem solving take place on social media. So I'm going to go through a couple of the other benefits of being a member of SIG. So if you could just follow along with me, that would be great. So we have a number of partnerships that are part of your SIG membership, and I will touch on these briefly. But Everest Group is the premier analyst firm in our space, and they have dedicated an incredibly great research and technology group, newly formed under Michael Jansen a couple of years ago, focused 100% on procurement. So a very fantastic analyst group for you to follow. SIG Innova is where we're testing and working with emerging startup companies, and it may have great responses to where we might have gaps in existing suites. And then GEP has brought us a lot of thought leadership at no cost for you at all. In addition, this is one that I hope you get really excited about. If I could tell you, you could save $5 per person per hour for every staff augmentation person you had on staff. $5 per hour per person every single day. You could save millions of dollars a year. And that's what our members are finding out with the People Picker tool. You can go out and benchmark the pay rates, and this is based on hundreds of points of input that they receive. And you can reduce the amount of money that you're spending immediately by downloading the Ticker tool. In addition, we have partnered with Spend Matters, and as many of you probably have followed for years and years, Jason Bush, who founded Spend Matters, is a premier expert on procurement technology. Now that's where they focus. They follow 75 of the top technology providers in our industry. I didn't even know there were 75 in our industry, to be honest with you, until I started following Spend Matters more closely. So we have a number of areas where you can get some steep discounts and some great information about the existing providers that are out there through Spend Matters. So our summit. Now, folks, I would love for you all to do me one favor. Put your phones face down, turn off your news input, and let's not talk about the coronavirus much for the next hour if we could. Because right now, as of now, we are still having our summit, April 20th through 22nd in Orlando. If that changes, we will be the first ones to let you know. But if this event still happens, which I'm really hoping and praying it still will, this is where you want to be for those 3 days. Beautiful Orlando Champions Gate Hotel, lots of fresh air. We'll do elbow bumping. We'll make sure that everybody stays healthy, but if this event takes place, you want to be there because we're going to have over 350 to 400 thought leaders, and I encourage you to join us for this event. And then upcoming as well, I do want you to know that our Western Regional event that is on this page on March 19th has just been rebooked to October 1st, and we are letting all the attendees know that that has been moved as of today. So if you're planning on traveling to Bellevue or if you're up in the Seattle Bellevue area and planning on attending that event, we will be contacting you today with the changes. As of now, our Midwestern Regional event in Columbus is still a go, along with our New York Regional event, which is our East Coast event, and along with our Northeast Regional. So please stay tuned at sig.org/events, and we will keep that calendar updated at all times for you. So what I'd like to do is tell you about my proudest achievement, seriously, in my entire professional life, and I've had lots of things I'm very proud of, but SIG University is number one on my list. I am passionate about education, I should say, and I have no problem saying you don't know what you don't know, and if you have not been studying, and if you have not been progressing and changing and adapting, you have now fallen behind. So SIG University was launched at the bequest of our members. They said there's no modern certification available today for today's sourcing professionals, and we need something. We created originally a certified sourcing professional. We have over 1,100 people that are certified as a certified sourcing professional in over 17 countries. But now we have over 22,000 courses that have been completed across 4. We're going on to 4 certification programs now, with graduates in those programs in addition from 150 companies. We have certifications available in sourcing, supply management, third-party risk management, and we just started our intelligent automation certification. And that one has just been met with incredible response where people are saying, oh my God, I wish I had taken this course before I started any kind of automation. So I would encourage you all to look at SIG University. And hey, if we are in a lockdown and everyone's working from home and you have some time on your hands and you can't travel, why not get certified? I mean, let's look for the silver lining here. It's a great chance for you to add to your resume and certainly add additional ways you can add value to your companies in these very interesting times that we're in today. So a couple things I want to tell you before we go on. First off, I know you're here not to listen to me, but for this webinar. And we have a fantastic presentation for you today and a great presenter. But what I want to do is also encourage you to present your questions. So if you open up an area on your screen that says Q&A, and you can type in your questions at any point during today's webinar, we will then hold the questions to the end of the webinar, and we will attempt to answer all of them. Now, we've only asked for your calendar for 1 hour, so at the top of the hour, we will end this webinar. But my friends at Denali, a WNS company, have assured me that they will come back and answer every question that was not answered live on today's webinar. So please keep the questions coming, and then we will make sure that we are able to get those questions into everybody. If you have any issue at all with your audio right now, excuse me, click on the communicate button and dial into this event. If you're listening to your computers, some people are going to have glitches with Wi-Fi and different things. So if you have any problem at all, please dial in. As always, the preferred method if you want to have great sound versus voice over internet protocol. So with that, I'm excited. I get to introduce you to Greg Anderson, and I'm going to be asking some questions as we go through today's webinar. I know Greg for a number of years, and while I could create my own introduction for him, and I could be very colorful too, I'm going to actually ask Greg to maybe introduce yourself to the audience. So welcome, Greg, and thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Dawn. It's great talking with you today. I just want to confirm you can hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great. So can you share with the audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. So if I look at like a lot of people in procurement, right, my career didn't begin there. I actually went to school for engineering. I spent the first third of my career in manufacturing operations. My very first job, I worked at PPG as a production engineer making float glass for the automotive industry. And I ultimately worked my way up to a plant manager position at General Electric in their lighting division in that business. And I think now it's appropriate to recognize Jack Welch, who passed this weekend. You know, I was there during the Jack Welch era at GE, and I'd really like to tell people that's where I grew up as a professional, was that environment. He created such a place for leadership development, and I was really fortunate to be a part of that. And I didn't want to let that go by without acknowledging Jack Welch and his passing. So, but anyway, after GE, I left manufacturing in 1999. And that year's significant, right? That was the dot-com boom, and really left for 2 reasons. The first reason was a desire to stop relocating. As great as GE was, I was moving about every 2 years on this track, and we were starting to have children, and we wanted to raise our family in a more stable environment. At least the home environment could be more stable, right? So the second reason was, you know, the dot-com era was upon us, and the potential of the internet seemed really great to me, and I wanted to be part of that new economy at the time. So we ended up moving to Pittsburgh, where we still live today. So mission accomplished on you know, raising the family in one place. And then I joined Free Markets to come to Pittsburgh, really. And I'm sure a lot of people on this call recognize the name Free Markets. There's a bit of a Free Markets mafia out there in the procurement world. And I was fortunate there to lead the Global Market Operations Center for a couple of years. And while I was doing that, I would tour people through. We'd have clients come through. We'd have potential prospects come through. And after a lot of those meetings where I tour people through this area, the sales guys would pull me aside and say, Greg, you need to come over to the sales side of the business. You have a natural ability to talk to these folks. So ultimately, that's how I discovered my true calling as a growth guy. So for the last 20 years, I've had growth roles at several technology and professional services companies, all of them focused on supply chain, on sourcing, and on procurement. And what I enjoy doing is leading market-facing teams and helping our clients improve their operations. So currently, I lead go-to-market operations, and that includes sales, marketing, and product management for Denali, which is a WNS company. So that's a bit of my history there, Dawn. I don't know. Is there anything else you'd like to know about me?
I know all kinds of things, but Greg, if you could also share then a little bit about Denali WNS. I mean, I personally have a long history with them, but if you could just share with the audience a little bit about Denali WNS, that would be great as well.
Sure. So outcome-driven companies partner with WNS Denali to operationalize their procurement function, improve their financial performance and efficiency. And how we do that, we work alongside our clients to co-create. We really literally work with them in literally putting models together, sometimes on whiteboards with Post-it notes, to figure out what's the best way to set up their operating model, right? So we help them implement that and execute what we call a next generation sort of customized operating model that's tailored for their business and their needs. And by doing so, we help them increase the strategic impact of procurement for their businesses. People say, well, why is Denali different, or how is Denali unique, right? And it's really our people. All our people are procurement practitioners, and those folks provide a range of advisory and managed services, along with enabling technology to help our clients build an integrated procurement ecosystem that empowers them to create more value and outperform in the market. So that's what Denali does. We've been part of WNS now for 3 years, and that's enabled us to grow on a global scale and really deliver a full range of services to our clients.
Well, that's exciting. So thank you for joining us today. And as usual, Denali WNS always brings us great content and great experts. And so, Greg, I'm excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Dawn. Great to be here. So I think the idea we want to talk about today is this idea of a procurement ecosystem, right? And before I really get into what we mean by that and go through some very interesting information out of a study we conducted, I want to put things in perspective and really talk about the shift that's been happening in procurement. And this has been a shift I've been able to witness, and a lot of people that I work with have witnessed over the last 10 to 15 years. And when you look back at the past in procurement, there was really, the focus was on really one of 3 areas. One was just getting this spend under management, putting more spend under the management of professionals, and solutions were created, whether they were services or technology solutions, but there was a lot of solutions that came out to improve spend visibility and to manage different types of spend, indirect catalog items, direct materials, services, MRO, contingent labor. You name the spend, there seemed to be a solution built to source and manage it more professionally. Cost savings is the second improvement area, and that's sort of a standing metric or MBO for any procurement executive. And there's different ways were brought out. So at free markets, we had auctions, right? And auctions have had their day, but I think there's still a place for them in a lot of businesses. But, there was supplier rationalization, demand management, and a lot of other different strategies that were perfected to increase cost savings. It was really the advent of strategic sourcing really coming to life. And then I'd say the third area, and it was really driven by technology, was this process efficiency, right? And that's how people were applying technology to take out the work that just consumed a lot of non-value added time, and apply technology to drive those efficiencies. So then fast forward to today, where procurement in many companies has really further evolved through deliberate transformation efforts. And I think transformation is just an ongoing thing in our industry, right? So the profession today has been elevated. We see performance improvements driven through strategies like category planning, greater use of strategic sourcing practices, ongoing application of digital solutions. There's more and more digital solutions. As you mentioned, I think you said Jason Bush and his crew at Spend Matters cover 75 of them, right? That's just a staggering number to think there'd be that many different solutions out there. All of those are built to drive greater efficiencies and effectiveness, right? So when you look at it today, operational excellence is a very big deal. And companies seem to be obsessed with being best in class. They want to know how they stack up. They want to benchmark against industry peers on all sorts of what I'd say are traditional procurement metrics. How much spend do you have under management? What % of your POs go through all the way to payment without being touched by a human? How much productivity you're driving, right? What are you getting out of your people? So these are metrics that are now being used to measure the operational effectiveness and efficiencies of procurement. So, those are measures that are sort of internal to procurement, and where things are going now, where we see things happening, is this shift that's happening, and it's redefining really what best in class means for procurement. So procurement teams can no longer afford to focus primarily on these inward metrics and operational improvements that might mean a lot to the function, but they may not be considered strategically important by business stakeholders. That's a hard pill to swallow, right? We're getting better, we're doing things, we're best in class, we ranked ourselves against other people, but then you survey stakeholders and they say, wait a minute, I'm not seeing that. I recall a time I was consulting at a services-based company. They had a number of business units, and we were looking at, what needs to happen there. A private equity company had bought them, and they said there's opportunity there. And we went in, we found out that procurement was very disconnected from the business stakeholders. So they were touting all these savings that they were generating and sort of waving their own flag, but the business presidents, when I went and talked to them in focus interviews, said, I'm just not seeing it in my bottom line. I don't know, they're making a lot of noise, but I'm not seeing what they can do for my business. They're not helping me achieve my goals. So that disconnect still exists, right? And where we see things going is that procurement has to improve what we call a total business alignment and focus on what they can do to support the achievement of their company's most important business outcomes. This means procurement's focus really has to shift away from those traditional definitions of best in class. I think it's still okay to benchmark and measure yourself against others, but in addition to that, you got to make sure you're aligned with the initiatives that are more meaningful to the business. So let me give you a specific example instead of just talking in theory. We have a high-tech client at Denali, and they prioritize speed to market and the customer experience over any cost savings. Cost savings are great, but they're not the first priority. So when you say, let's measure how this procurement organization is doing against standard benchmarks, right? By traditional definitions, their procurement team would not even be considered best in class because they're not proactively delivering year-over-year incremental cost savings. That's a key measure, right? The business, though, views procurement as strategically integrated partner, and they're involved in the forecasting, planning, and early-stage product development. So the value delivered through speed and agility for this particular procurement organization far surpasses the value that would be generated through cost savings alone. So we see a future where best-in-class procurement organizations will build and optimize their ecosystem to achieve that total business alignment within the larger ecosystem of the company, right? So procurement's an ecosystem within a giant company ecosystem. And they'll make strategic contributions to achieving business outcomes, so there'll be better alignment.
So Greg, you're talking about a procurement ecosystem, and I'm not quite sure I really understand this. I mean, it makes sense to have an ecosystem around all these things, but can you tell me a little bit more about the ecosystem itself?
Can do. Let's see here.
Thank you.
There we go. How about if I just draw it out for you here? I typically like to do this on a whiteboard. but this is a lot cleaner. I thank my marketing team for putting this together. It's in such a clear way. So what is an ecosystem? When we talk about a procurement ecosystem, it's really a company-specific, highly interconnected business environment. And like any ecosystem, it has both internal and external elements. So we look at these key elements, right? The players in here, you have the CPO and their team. And that often includes the category managers. Sometimes it's not a category manager. Maybe they're a procurement business partner, right? Whatever the name is, those folks are key strategic folks that are interfacing with stakeholders, right? Then you have the operations team that goes and executes all the category strategies that the procurement team puts together, goes out and works on typically a portfolio of projects and makes sure everything's running smoothly from day-to-day operations point of view. You have stakeholders who help shape and define the business outcomes that procurement is there to support. And then you have suppliers, right, who are going to be engaged by procurement to deliver on the business outcomes that the stakeholders need. So that's all the players, right? There's a complex group of people, and in operations, that could be internal folks as well as any third-party partners that you use if you outsource or outtask some of the work. And then surrounding all of this is this environmental, the group of environmental elements, we'll call them, that further define the ecosystem. So there's strategy and planning, right? What are the specific strategies and plans that flow from the business requirements that we're going to go out and put together a portfolio of projects or try to bring in a supplier that can bring a certain innovation to the company. There's data and information, right? That's spend data, that's market intelligence, that's data on supplier capabilities and supplier risk and supplier performance. There's knowledge and capabilities. That's on your team and any external people that you work with to kind of fulfill the mission of procurement. There's output capacity. Now I'm getting really operational geeky here, but right, that's the throughput that the procurement operations can deliver. And a lot of times procurement doesn't quite have what they need to get everything done that the business needs them to do. So you have to be looking at that output capacity and say, how do I expand that? How do I increase that or manage that so that we're working and able to get to the things we need to get to in the time frame that we're being asked to do it. There's a platform, right? So any enabling technologies and tools that are used, it may not be a single platform. It may be a number of interconnected, technology and digital solutions that are being used within this ecosystem. And then there's policies and processes that defines how things get done and the governance around how the function works. So you put all this together and you say, hey, the stronger this ecosystem and the more integrated these elements are, the stronger our performance will be. And right here, I want to stop and say where many procurement organizations fail is when they optimize these elements individually rather than optimizing the entire system as a whole. For example, I've hired a really smart category manager. This person knows IT and software very well. They're very smart in that category. But if they can't effectively engage the business stakeholders, the CIO and his team, well, then that might be a shortcoming that you're going to have with that category manager, right? They need to understand the stakeholder requirements. Or let's say a company goes out and licenses multiple technology solutions and doesn't think through the integration requirements for effective master data management. And now you've got a bunch of systems and you have supply masters in 3 different systems, and which one, you have this non-harmonized supplier data you're trying to work with. And, so you don't think through the whole ecosystem. So as you put together this ecosystem, there's a couple of implications. One is that there's no single best-in-class ecosystem. The ecosystem has to be tailored to fit your specific business needs within your company's larger system. The second implication is that systems thinking is required to optimize an ecosystem. I say system a lot here, sorry. But understanding and appreciating how everything integrates and works together is really key to solving your procurement challenges. So you can't make decisions about this ecosystem in isolation. And we're advocating think about the whole thing and how all these pieces work together to optimize the performance of your procurement function. Does that make sense?
You know, it does, but you brought up systems thinking, which I'm a big fan of, but not everybody's aware of how that works. So do you have any examples where you could talk about system thinking where perhaps it wasn't used and it should have, what went wrong, what could be fixed by that?
Yes. So I've got a couple stories, couple specific examples. And the first one takes me way back, more than 10 years ago. And we were working with an aerospace manufacturing company at the time and talking to their VP of sourcing and saying, hey, you know, tell us about your personal objectives. How are you going to get bonus, right? What is your bonus based on? Because we always try to understand what motivates people and what's driving them. And he mentioned a low-cost country sourcing target, right? It's been a while since we've talked about low-cost countries, but back then it was really in vogue. And we said, well, how is your target defined? He said, well, I have a goal to have 15% of our direct material spend sourced from low-cost countries. And we said, 15%? How did you arrive at that? He says, oh, that was set after my leadership, you know, saw an article in the Wall Street Journal about low-cost country sourcing. They said, hey, you should try to get 15% there, okay? Now, the problem with this kind of an objective is that any good VP of sourcing, anybody worth their salt, they can move 15% of spend to low-cost countries, right? You can move printed circuit board assemblies to China or to Malaysia or somewhere, right? And he can make his bonus. But by doing so, it's sort of a perverse incentive, right? It may result in a higher cost to the business. He hits his number, but the business is now ultimately paying more because you have to factor in the transportation, the duties, the tariffs, and then the cash you tie up in working capital to manage that longer supply chain, not to mention the risk you introduce by having a supply chain that's that far away, right? So the objective here was set in isolation. It wasn't, you didn't really consider the greater impact on the business. So systems thinking, in this case, would dictate that low-cost country sourcing has to be evaluated using a total landed cost approach. And the great John Miller, now retired from Whirlpool, really, he used a term once with me that really made it stick. And he said, it's really about best cost country sourcing. And in that case, you're considering the piece price of the item you're buying. You're also considering those supply chain costs and the risks of a particular sourcing strategy when making that decision. So that's systems thinking. That's where you're thinking through the whole picture and coming up with the right solution.
Well, and anytime you talk about full, total cost and landed cost and get beyond price, I get really excited. But I know part of the transformation for a lot of companies in procurement today is related to technology. So can you share any examples of technology actually helping with the transformation or creating a transformational environment?
Sure. One unfortunate thing, we'll see this in some data we're going to hit later, is that we see a lot of situations where technology is just not delivering the anticipated benefits, right? I think there was some fear of missing out on tech. People ran into it. I think there's a lot more thought going into technology selection these days in procurement. But, the benefits aren't there for a couple of reasons. Sometimes it's because it's the wrong technology, but oftentimes it happens when a tech selection is made without consideration for that fit within the broader ecosystem. So specific example here, I know a healthcare company. They wanted to improve efficiencies. They implemented a popular procure-to-pay system without really considering the supplier experience. So they didn't think about that part of the ecosystem. So any two-sided marketplace requires participation from both sides, right, buyers and suppliers, to work effectively. If one of them doesn't show up, there's no transactions, right? There's not commerce happening. So in this case, the suppliers were refusing to use the system because they considered it a clunky user experience, plus the fact that they had to pay network fees on top of that. And ultimately, this healthcare company switched to a new technology that improved that experience and charged the network fees. They saw supplier adoption go up immediately, but it was a really expensive lesson to learn because they didn't think through how are the suppliers going to accept this technology? They just really looked at their side of the marketplace.
So, Greg, I didn't ask for Debbie Downer. That is like, yes, that's what it. That's what you don't want to do. Do you have anything positive you can share about technology? Because I'm a big proponent of technology. So don't you be making me upset here.
No, I'm not, Dawn. I'm really not trying to upset you. And there is a positive story I can share. So we have a high-tech client, right, where the stakeholders there care much more about business expansion. This is a growing business, and they have aggressive expansion plans, and they want to, they care more about market share and business expansion and cost savings. So here the procurement team's done a great job of aligning their strategies, and including their technology strategy, and the operating model to support business outcomes that matter most to the stakeholders. So they're not being measured by your typical procurement metrics, right? And that's an important distinction, I think, to make here. An important point to make is that if procurement continues to be measured by these standard benchmarks, whereas they're being asked to serve a different and more strategic mission, you really need to adjust that and look at what their objectives are and how they have to change those objectives to align with the business outcomes they're expected to support. So if you measure procurement only on traditional goals like cost savings, in this high-tech company's case, that would cause a major misalignment with the business needs of the stakeholders. So it's really critical to evaluate procurement in the procurement ecosystem's performance overall properly, right? So, hey, are they helping us to achieve the outcomes? Let's not just focus on traditional measures like savings and spend under management, but are they helping us propel the business forward and create the positive customer experience by bringing innovation into the company and all the other things that great procurement organizations do?
So, Greg, I know I said let's not talk about the coronavirus, but I have to for a second, because we're entering into a time when it's going to be a big challenge for a lot of supply chains. And, there'll be a burning platform. Suddenly, people are going to pay attention to sourcing and procurement again because there may be a shortage of goods. But this ecosystem development that you're talking about by 2025, I think is absolutely critical. So what could we do right now? Talk about how a company can make their procurement ecosystem start to work for them now. Okay, that helps.
Yeah, super. Yeah, super.
All right, start with a vision. Okay.
There's one, yeah. You want answers? I got slides full of them, Dawn. No, so what I want to do here, I'm going to use some findings, right, some data, right, because as smooth a talker as I am, I always like to back everything up with real facts, right? So, and good sourcing people love facts and like to make decisions based on data, right? So we did a survey recently, and I'm going to use some findings from that benchmark study, actually, we did with SIPs to support the recommendations I'm about to make. So I'm just going to interpret this data and spell it out, right? So SIPS, by the way, is the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, and they're a global professional body based out of the UK, and their mission is advancing the procurement and supply management professions. They have a community of over 200,000 procurement and supply folks and members in over 150 countries. But so they're big and they're global. We partnered with them last fall to survey more than 300 companies and better understand what are the traits of these high-performing procurement organizations. And the findings were interesting because when you look at the traditional measures, it wasn't really clear results. But when we looked into it deeper and looked at business alignment as well as operating value that was perceived, there we started to see some good correlations. So what we found is there's not one best procurement operating model. There's not one best technology package or spend management process. What we found is high-performing organizations demonstrated really tight alignment with their business objectives, what I referred to earlier as total business alignment. And the better this alignment was, the higher the value procurement was providing to the business. So what I thought I'd do for this discussion is to highlight 5 critical contributors to total business alignment that we saw in this study and that people can focus on when building out their ecosystem so that they can deliver more value to their company. And the first recommendation I would make is right here, right in front of your face, right? is to have and communicate a clear vision for procurement. Now, this seems obvious, and it always blows my mind where you go in and there's a lack of vision in places, right? Say, what are you trying to be, right? Where are we going? That's what a vision is. People need to know where they're going so that they know, okay, that's where we're going. I know my part in getting us there. So that has to be really defined and communicated. So conceiving that, documenting it, and communicating that vision has a far-reaching impact across the procurement operations. If people know where we're going and the strategy is going to be how we get there, then they'll make the right moves. So procurement teams with a vision have higher spend under management, they have better category planning rigor and execution, and they're more integrated with their stakeholders' business objectives. A stat that's not on this screen, but it was interesting to note, is that 59% of the visionaries, the high performers, have clearly documented communication and change management plans for the procurement organization. Now, change management is one of those terms that gets bandied around a lot, and some people, it's a throwaway term, but you really have to focus on it. So it's really important to communicate the vision and really address the things that need to happen in order to make change happen so that the vision can be achieved. So that's our first recommendation: is start with a vision, make sure it's clear, and make sure it's tied to the greater business objectives you're trying to drive.
But I think just as important, I want to just emphasize what you said about change management. When I first started off in procurement, to me that was the hocus pocus, feel good, blah, 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 blah. And I did not respect it nearly like I should have. And, coming from a hard science background like you do, it's like it should be obvious where people need to go, and it should be obvious what the answer is. And yet the change management is the only way that you're going to get people to change. And if we don't get people to change, no matter what our vision is, we're not going to be able to achieve it. So I'm glad you still use the term like change management, because I think that is absolutely critical for today's professional to understand that you can have the best vision in the world, but if people don't follow you, nothing's going to happen. So thank you for keeping that in your vernacular.
Yeah, and we don't just keep it in my vernacular. We help our clients, with that. It's a super important part when we go into work with clients to make sure that everyone understands that, and that we look at all the elements that it takes to make change happen, and we address those and make sure we don't fall short somewhere. So thank you. Yeah. I think we've got a polling question now.
So we do. So folks, in the right-hand corner of your screen, you're going to have a pop-up of the polling question. And so in 1 minute or 30 seconds, right now, it will pop up. And so the question is, rate the strengths of your team's vision. Non-existent. Okay, that's not good. Good, but not clearly communicated. Good, communicated but too tactical. I see a lot of that. And strong strategic vision shared with all stakeholders. Ooh, that sounds like nirvana. So if you get a chance, please go to the right-hand corner of your screen and click on one of those and hit submit, and then we will populate the results. So Greg, I sort of think where I think the answer is going to be. What about you?
I have an idea.
Where do you think predominant?
But I'd say it's going to be.
The poll is ended, so you can say it. You can say it because it's now populating.
Okay, I'm going to say good communicated but too tactical. That's my guess.
Yep, that's my guess too. I hope we're wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
We'll find out.
We're not, but it's even worse. Wow.
So, John, I'm not seeing that pop on my screen.
Well, it says non-existent is 7%, good, but not clearly communicated 44%, good, communicated but too tactical 33%, and we have strong for only 11%, which means we have 77% in the B and C, just good, but either not communicated well enough or too tactical. That's not good.
Right. Yeah. Well,
or
that's fairly consistent.
We'll make that positive.
Yeah, But the results here are consistent with what we saw in the study with SIPs that we did, and so it seems like there's a real opportunity there, right?
Yes, I agree.
Great.
Always an opportunity to improve.
Well, thanks everyone who participated in the poll. I think we got a few more. Other recommendations? Here we go. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about stakeholder alignment, right? So here, improve the stakeholder relationships and alignment. High performers have tight integration with the business. They develop strategies to support the achievement of business outcomes. I keep saying business outcomes. That's so important to keep in mind. So stakeholders are a super critical element within the procurement ecosystem, and it's really, that's the people with whom you have to achieve the total business alignment. So when you look at traditional businesses, people may be familiar with what's called an S&OP process, right? That's sales and operations planning, right? And that's to make sure that the operation is integrated and aligned and synced up with what sales is doing in a business. Let's say it's a manufacturing business. You have to say, okay, what are we going to run promotions on? What do we need to be prepared to produce based on what sales is telling us? The same kind of process, that integrated business management, integrated business planning, can be applied in procurement, right? So you want to make sure you're getting a focus and alignment and synchronization across functions, and procurement needs to actively participate in the strategic planning process. So we see that, in these results that 63% are fully integrated with those objectives in their strategic planning, and that's really key. So get involved early in the annual planning cycle as you're laying out what projects you're going to work on for the year. Make sure that those are reviewed with the stakeholder and the stakeholders have input into those and that they're supporting what the stakeholders are trying to do. It's so key to have this alignment to make sure you're contributing value to the business. And this is where you need to make sure, too, that you've got capacity in your organization to have these stakeholder discussions, right? So if people are constantly chasing sourcing project results, running down a supplier who's got an issue, trying to get a supplier paid or something like that, that takes away from the strategic time they should be spending with stakeholders, figuring out what's important, and putting together an operating plan for the year. So it's important to give people that capacity to do that kind of work. So how do you do that? That's going to go right into my next recommendation here, right?
Thank you.
A key finding is how do high performers structure their work, right? So we found 78% of the visionary companies, the high performers, segment tactical from strategic roles, right, within the company. So the strategic work, category management, being a good business partner and working with those stakeholders to understand the objectives, understanding where you can provide value, and managing those stakeholder relations. It's important to separate that away from the execution and transactional activities. And, we see 20% maybe of a category manager's time might be spent on strategic things. You say, wait a minute, why isn't that 80%? So, in the best organizations, there's a team thinking about strategy and another's focused on operation and the execution of that strategy, right? And by dividing up the work appropriately, it creates the capacity to create a more strategic organization that's contributing more value. So people have time to build strong relationships and better category strategies that support the achievement of the business outcomes. So we find the high performers invest the time and the resources into planning and forward-looking stakeholder partnering, and then they create specialized execution roles, either in-house or with third-party support teams, to carry out those strategies. So it's a matter of giving people the capacity, Dawn, that they need to get the work done and be strategic contributors to the business. So it creates a rethink. I encourage people to break down the activities and the tasks and say, what should we have certain folks focusing on and what should we have other folks focusing on? Not that a category manager is above dealing with a supplier issue, but that shouldn't be something that distracts them away from really contributing a real value to the organization and spending time out there with the stakeholders.
Absolutely. I can't agree more. Really good point. So another polling question. So folks, this will populate in the right-hand corner of your screen now. And this goes along with what Greg was discussing. And it says, is your operating model aligned with your major business objectives and organizational culture? 1, A, I don't know. B, no, we are a red tape organization and people hate us. Ooh. C, maybe yes, we segment our work and align teams to stakeholders. And D, yes, our team is aligned to the needs of our business and we focus only on delivering the value they need. So you can select your result and submit it. But Greg, one of the things you said about aligning with your major business objectives of your business stakeholders is, you know, and I have constantly said this, and it's been a long time since I've been in consulting, but it still is true today when I ask people, is a lot of procurement folks don't even read the business plans of the business units that they support. And that to me, first off, is a sin. And if you're not religious, it's just wrong. It's just wrong, you know? Like, if you don't know what their business case is, how can you possibly help them be successful? So, you know, I hate the fact that we're still saying that. And the results came up and said, C, overwhelming 61%. Maybe yes.
That's
we
great.
segment our work and align teams to stakeholders. That's awesome. 22% are D. That's really good.
Yeah.
And 17%
that's
are in
great.
A and B.
Yeah, I love the C and D, you know, looking at 83% there. So I think the audience here gets this part, and it's important, right? Because you try to do these things, and you've just got to make sure that the organization is structured the right way to deliver. So this is very encouraging to see this result. It's awesome.
Now, Greg,
back to
you got
to know this business plan.
Do you have a couch or people that voted A? Yeah, so people that voted A and B can come in and have a therapy session with you?
I do consider myself a part-time therapist from time to time. Some of the discussions I have. So yeah, I'd be happy to help them. Yeah, happy to help them.
Okay, good.
But
A and B people, call Greg.
Yeah, there you go. Great. So let's move on to the next recommendation that we've got here, and that's really about talent, right? Knowledge and capabilities, and everybody knows that people are the secret, right, to anything, right? You can have mediocre processes that can be overcome by great people, but you can't have great processes and methods. And if your team is not strong or isn't being given the development opportunities and the chance and the investment they need to build out their skills, you're only going to get so far. So you got to have the right people in an ecosystem to make it work. And 75% of the top performers, make that a priority in our organization. And that's strategic resource planning, that's team building, that's recruiting, retention, development, rewards, recognition, culture, right? You really got to make it strong. And as procurement organizations mature and become more intentional in developing these stakeholder partnerships, and as you bring more and more digitization into the function, and it impacts the way we work, procurement's approach to talent and talent management has to evolve. Right? The team maybe that got you here may not be the team that gets you there, right? And either that team has to change, you have to change some players, or you have to really focus, say, do I have the right people, and can I upskill my people? Can they take on these new duties and responsibilities, or, do we need to bring in some folks that have more technical chops or expertise? Do we need to bring in people that are a bit more salesy and can go out and talk with the stakeholders more effectively, right? So it has to, they have to be able to build those relationships and be credible and be valued and respected by stakeholders. And, that doesn't work all the time for everybody. So you really have to look at your team and say, do we have the right folks, and how do I invest in them and upskill them? We found that more than 90% of the high performers signaled it to us that building and acquiring subject matter expertise and category knowledge within their team was either very important or critical to procurement performance. So the high performers are recognizing this need and they're taking actions on it.
I'm glad to see that. I like that.
Yeah. So the last recommendation of the 5 that I said I would cover here is about digital. We've been mentioning digital along the way. As you can see here, 83% of the folks have implemented digital tools. That struck me as kind of low, but that's what the results were. But wow, look at that, 43% aren't seeing value, and only 28% report great adoption. Now, I will say that those that cited excellent adoption, 100% of them were in the high performer, well-aligned group. So they picked the right technology. They chose it wisely, as we say here, right? And achieving that high adoption and the value from digital solutions really requires a thoughtful selection process that considers kind of where and how the tech fits into the broader ecosystem. So will both parties, as I mentioned before, buyers and suppliers, embrace the solution? Will the solution be effective for your company spend, right? You buy a P2P catalog solution and you don't have a lot of catalog spend, maybe you have a lot of services spend and you use a lot of contractors. Well, maybe you should invest first in a VMS system rather than in a catalog system, right? So it has to fit, and you have to consider a lot of factors when you're picking a technology, right? You know me, Don, I sold direct materials focused technology forever, and it would drive me crazy that these folks were trying to use indirect solutions to manage direct materials.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't purpose built for that, right? So the last thing I'd say here is your company's culture, right? Do people embrace technology-driven change, or are you going to be fighting an uphill battle to get somebody to log in and issue a requisition rather than maybe sending an email, right? So everybody's working on making that experience better with the technology. I think there's just such great competition and a push to have really user-friendly, and the user experience is getting better, I think, across tech. I mean, vis-a-vis where it used to be, but there's still a ways to go there. So as tech continues to be the kind of a key enabler of transformation, I'm urging people, what happens a lot is people abstract the technology and kind of look at it in isolation. But you really need to look at technology as it's an interwoven component. That's what it is. It's part of this ecosystem, and it has to be evaluated for what it is, which is enabler of more efficient and effective business processes. A guy at a major corporation once said to me, that's a great tool, but a fool with a tool is still a fool. And I'm like, hey, you're not very kind to your people. No, he goes, I'm just saying, if the people don't know how to use it effectively, it's not gonna work, right? So you got to think through the whole picture. So that was one of my first lessons in understanding and appreciating the ecosystem. So here I believe we have another poll. So
we do. So in the right-hand corner of your screen, are you seeing value from the digital tools that you have implemented? A is yes, B is no, C is values from some but not others, and D, still implementing, yet to see complete value. So I hope we either have a lot of A's, but I'm getting no B's. How about that? Let's hope there are no B's. But I'm guessing we'll have a lot of C's and D's.
Yeah, I would say I'll put some chips on yes, but I'll put some on C. A lot of my chips on C. We'll see how it goes.
Okay. Well, then people need to come to the Spring Summit, where we're going to be showcasing up to 50 different procurement technologies. And then, Greg, I'll make you go from Innovation Hall stand from one to the other and talk about where the value is. How's that?
Great.
Can I put you?
Yeah, put me on the spot.
I'll give you a microphone and say, all right, let's talk. I'll put you on the spot. Let's talk about the value. Where is it? Come on, folks, show it. But I'm excited to be able to showcase so many technologies. Oh, look. So, yes,
I bet paid
11%.
Off. Yeah.
No was 11. But C and D, look at that, 63 and 15.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this as positive.
I think so. Yes, I think there's going to be a shakeout, right? People will continue to they'll find their way, right? I saw a lot of technology switching going on when I was in that market, and I think people are now taking a much more thoughtful approach and really putting in place tech that's going to be more valuable. So I think this will continue. I think if we took this poll a year from now, we'd see more yeses, just based on what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So,
that's great. I love
awesome.
that. Good. Yay.
So,
okay,
hey, we've covered a lot of ground, and I know we're going to go into Q&A, Dawn, but before we do, if I could just cap this with 3 key points I'd like to make. Is that okay?
Absolutely. And then folks keep the questions coming. Like I said, if we don't get to them here, we will make Greg and his team follow up with you in writing. So keep them coming.
Will do, yes. Yeah, so really 3 key points if you walk away from this with anything. It's first, the definition of best-in-class procurement is changing as the function shifts away from more of an execution role to be a more strategic and integrated contributor to value. So what is best-in-class and how you measure that really needs to be specific to the value you're providing to your company. Second point, have to improve total business alignment between procurement and the stakeholders of the business and really focus on what procurement can do to support the achievement of the company's most important business outcomes. And the third point is that high performers focus on optimizing their complete ecosystem for procurement to really achieve that total business alignment and increase the strategic impact of procurement. And hopefully these tips that we've talked about today and these recommendations are there. You can see here that we do have a link here where you can go download that benchmark report. It's long, it's a lot of pages, but I'm telling you, it's really good. I was really impressed with what our marketing team and SIPs put together here. It's easy to read, easy to understand, and it focuses in on key areas. So I really encourage people to get that report. I think you'll find a lot of value in it. That's it. I'll take questions now, Dawn.
That's great. Okay, thank you, Greg. And then, Destiny, if you could, let's just go ahead and push the deck. A number of people are asking about it. If you, on your screen, folks, you should see a gray box. If you click on it, you can download directly to your desktop a copy of today's presentation, so you'll have the slide deck. Now, tomorrow, at the latest, God forbidding any technology glitch, Destiny will be sending you a link to today's webinar, so you can share it with other people that were unable to come today, and that will be the full recording, the audio and the visual from today's webinar. In addition, this will be housed on our website for 2 years, so I know you'd like what you heard today. Go ahead and send that link out, and it will stay live for 2 years. So, Greg, with that, we have 3 quick minutes, but one of the questions that came in and says, how do you balance custom solutions with benchmarking data needs overall?
So you said balance custom solutions?
With benchmarking data needs overall. So with benchmarking data needs. So custom solutions don't necessarily bring you all of the best benchmarking because these are custom solutions. So is there a way that you can balance the need for custom solutions with your data needs overall?
Yeah, I think there is. I think you need to look at what's important to your business and say what are the needs we have. Right? There's a lot of data available out there. There's a proliferation, I'd say, of data, but maybe not of information, and you need to find out what's best for your business. So maybe this one we can use as a follow-up because I'm a little confused on what you mean by custom solutions. Is that specific to a particular market? But you know, that one maybe we can take offline to follow up on directly.
Absolutely. So, folks, whoever's sending that question, if you have a follow-on to that maybe explains a little bit better, that would be awesome. So one of the questions, can you provide an example of how you have seen organizations tackle their new stakeholder alignment gaps? How long does it take to achieve that alignment? I think this is really important.
Yeah, so they take deliberate actions, and they're very intentional about it. And they say, we are going to set up our operating model to free up the capacity of our category managers or slash business partners, procurement business partners, and we are going to spend time with the stakeholders, and we need the stakeholders to come to the table too. So we're hiring credible people that can go in and can have those conversations, and we're making sure that they're not pulled away to deal with the distractions, if you will, of the day-to-day execution. Execution is important, but you've got to make time and capacity. So that's one of the things we work on with our clients when we're setting up the operating model, is to help them organize in a way that they can provide that time to work with the stakeholders, and two, to train them through different methods to take a more strategic approach to category management and how to work with stakeholders effectively. So that's a real area where you have to invest in building those relationships.
Oh, I like that. So, folks, we are at the top of the hour, and as we always promise, we do only ask you for an hour, so we're going to keep it to an hour. But, Greg, there are a number of questions in queue that I hope you can get to, including, if known, how much time does it typically take for implementation of digital tools in the sourcing arena, to I like the concept of building a strong ecosystem, but what about suppliers? How important are they? And another one, were the respondents to the study more or less mature in their procurement operations? Could I have some more information? So if you get an opportunity, please answer those questions. We'll send them out to you. But Greg, thank you so much for today's presentation. As usual, Denali WNS always brings us great content, great presenters, and I've enjoyed spending this hour with you, Greg. So thank you so very much.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been great. I appreciate everybody that's tuned in today to listen, and those that will listen to the recording. And we will follow up on those questions. There were some really good ones in there. And, thanks for the opportunity to talk through this today. It's been great.
It's been great. And, folks, questions are still coming in, so keep them coming. Don't log out until you get your questions in. We'll make sure to get them over to Greg and his team. And, folks, I want to wish you a wonderful Tuesday morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. And I hope everybody stays safe and healthy from the coronavirus. And I hope to see you at one of our live events, in-person events very soon. If not, we'll see you on the webinar series, the podcast, or the blog very soon. So everybody have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, and enjoy. And thank you again, Greg.